The heavy oak doors of St. Jude's Cathedral rattled under the assault of the Chicago blizzard outside, but the chill settling in Maya's bones came from the whispering crowd inside, not the weather. The phone in her hand felt like a piece of ice burning her skin. She stared at the text message one last time, Brad's final act of cowardice glowing on the screen. I can't do this. You and the girl. It's too much baggage. Baggage. The word echoed in the vast, candlelit sanctuary, drowning out the soft organ music. Maya looked down at 5-year-old Zoe, who was innocently smoothing the skirt of her flower girl dress, unaware that her daddy Brad had just discarded them like trash. The whispers from the pews behind them grew louder, turning from confused murmurs into open scorn. I told you. Mrs. Ainsworth's voice sliced through the air, sharp and triumphant. Brad's mother stood in the front row, adjusting her pearls with a sneer. He finally realized a woman like her doesn't belong in this family. It was a charity case gone wrong. Her laugh was cruel, signaling the rest of the wealthy white guests that the show was over. They looked at Maya with vindication, their eyes stripping away her dignity piece by piece. Mommy. Zoe tugged at Maya's hand, her voice small and trembling in the hostile silence. Where is he? Is the wedding over? Maya couldn't breathe. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing her chest. She couldn't let Zoe see her cry. She turned to grab her daughter, desperate to run, to escape into the freezing snowstorm, rather than endure one more second of their judgment. But before she could take a step, the cathedral doors at the back crashed open. The sound was like a gunshot. A gust of snow swirled in, but the man stepping through the threshold was colder than the blizzard. Victor Sterling did not walk. He marched, flanked by men who looked more like soldiers than bodyguards. He wore a charcoal wool coat that swirled around him like a storm cloud, his silver hair swept back from a face carved of granite. The entire room froze. The whispers died instantly. Victor ignored the terrified guests. He walked straight down the aisle, his dark eyes locked on the empty altar. He stopped inches from where Maya stood trembling. He didn't look at her yet. He turned his gaze to Mrs. Ainsworth, who had gone pale. Brad is not coming, Victor announced, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that shook the stained glass. He is currently fleeing to the Caymans with $2 million he stole from me. Mrs. Ainsworth gasped, trying to muster her arrogance. Liar. My son is a businessman. Your son is a thief. Victor cut her off, his tone terrifyingly calm. And a coward who left his bride to answer for his sins. He finally turned to Maya. Up close, his power was overwhelming. He looked at her, then at the shivering child by her side, assessing the debt that stood before him. Victor's voice booms, he ran. But the debt remains. So, she is mine. Silence stretched tight as a wire, broken only by Zoe's innocent whisper. Mommy, is that the bad man? Maya pulled her daughter closer against her hip, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Across the aisle, Mrs. Ainsworth seemed to find her voice again, emboldened by the sheer absurdity of the stranger's claim. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking. I'm calling the police, she hissed, her face blotchy with indignation. You can't just barge into a private ceremony and threaten us. You're insane. Victor didn't flinch. He didn't even look at her. He simply raised one hand, and one of his men stepped forward, placing a thick file on the pew next to Mrs. Ainsworth. Go ahead, Martha, Victor said, his voice bored, as if discussing the weather. But before you dial, you should know that Sterling Holdings acquired the commercial bank servicing your family's estate this morning. And your son's outstanding business loans? I purchased those debt notes an hour ago. He took a slow, deliberate step toward the front pew, his shadow falling over the older woman. Make that call, and I will foreclose on your home before the police dispatch can even ask for your address. You will be homeless by nightfall. Mrs. Ainsworth went deathly pale. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering onto the wooden floor. She sank back into the pew, shrinking away from him. The rest of the guests looked down, terrified to meet Victor's gaze, realizing suddenly that the power in the room had shifted entirely. Victor turned his back on them, dismissing them as unworthy of his attention. He focused solely on Maya. The terrified silence of the church amplified his next words. You have a choice, Maya, he said, his tone dropping to a low rumble meant only for her ears. You can walk out those doors into the blizzard, with nothing but their laughter and pity following you. Or you can take my hand. I settle the debt. You gain my name, my protection, and a life far away from these people who despise you. Maya looked at the heavy doors, then at the man offering her a lifeline wrapped in danger. Why, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm nothing to you. You are collateral, he replied simply, though his eyes held a depth she couldn't read. He shifted his gaze down to Zoe, who was staring up at him with wide, fearful eyes. Slowly, deliberately, the terrifying crime boss lowered himself onto one knee. The entire church gasped. A man of his stature bowing to a child was unthinkable. Victor reached out, his large hand hovering for a moment before he gently straightened Zoe's crooked flower crown. I am not a bad man, little one, he said softly, his voice losing its sharp edge. I am the one who keeps the bad men away. That was the moment that broke Maya. In 2 years, Brad had never looked at Zoe with such focused attention, let alone kindness. She looked at the priest, who was trembling in his vestments, waiting for a signal. She looked at the Ainsworths, cowering in their expensive suits. And then she looked at Victor Sterling, waiting for her answer. Do it, she said, her voice finding steel. The ceremony was a blur of fear and adrenaline, spoken in hushed tones while the bodyguard stood watch. When it was time for the rings, Victor didn't ask for Brad's. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a ring that made the candlelight dance, a massive, flawless diamond set in platinum. Victor slips a massive diamond ring onto her finger. It fits perfectly. He whispers, You are Mrs. Sterling now. Lift your head. No one looks down on you again. The transition from the drafty cathedral to the interior of Victor's armored SUV was like stepping from a freezer into a warm bath. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing out the howling wind and the world that had rejected them. Maya sank into the cream leather seat, her hand brushing the smooth, expensive material. It felt impossibly soft against her calloused fingertips, a stark contrast to the rough upholstery of the city bus she took to her double shifts at the diner. Across from them, Victor sat with the relaxed posture of a man who owned everything he saw. He pressed a button, and a hidden compartment slid open. Apple juice, he said, handing a small carton with a straw to Zoe. I assumed champagne would be inappropriate for the flower girl. Zoe took it with wide eyes, looking at him as if he were a magician. Thank you, Mr. Badman, she whispered. Victor, he corrected gently, a faint smile touching his lips. Or Alex. But never Badman to you. Maya watched the exchange, her guard up. Who are you really? She asked, her voice low. Bankers don't travel with armed convoys. Businessmen don't buy debts in an hour. Victor's gaze shifted to her, dark and unreadable. I am a man who ensures order in a chaotic city. I need a wife for appearances to settle certain expectations in my world. You needed safety. It is a transaction, Maya. Mutual benefit. He paused, his eyes softening just a fraction. But know this, inside these walls, you are not a prisoner. You are protected. The car slowed, passing through massive iron gates that swung open silently. The Sterling estate loomed ahead, a fortress of stone and glass rising from the snow-covered grounds. It was magnificent, but the high walls and security cameras made Maya shiver. It looked like a castle, but castles could also be prisons. Come, Victor said as the car stopped. It has been a long day. He led them inside, past a foyer that was larger than Maya's entire apartment. He didn't stop for a tour but guided them straight up the sweeping staircase. Maya's anxiety spiked. Where would they sleep? Would he expect her to share his bed tonight? She tightened her grip on Zoe's hand, ready to fight if he tried to separate them. Victor stopped at the end of the hallway and placed his hand on a white door. For the child, he said simply, pushing it open. Maya braced herself for a sterile guest room. Instead, she gasped. The room was an explosion of violet, lavender, and deep plum. It was a little girl's wonderland. A canopy bed with sheer purple curtains stood in the center. A small table was set for a tea party with stuffed animals waiting on chairs. Even the rug was a soft, fluffy lilac cloud. It was entirely, perfectly purple, Zoe's absolute favorite color. Zoe squealed, releasing Maya's hand to run into the room, diving onto the bed. "Mommy, look. It's purple. It's all purple." Maya stood frozen in the doorway, her heart twisting in her chest. This wasn't a generic room prepared by a staff member. This was specific. This was personal. She turned to Victor, her breath hitching. "How did you know?" "I never told you. How did you know purple is her favorite?" Victor stood by the doorframe, his expression unreadable, though the ghost of warmth lingered in his eyes. He didn't offer a romantic platitude. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, looking every inch the calculating boss he claimed to be. "I make it my business to know what is precious to my investments," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away, leaving them surrounded by the thoughtful evidence of a heart he refused to admit he had. The exclusive boutique on the Magnificent Mile smelled of lavender and old money, a scent that usually made Maya want to shrink into herself, but today, she forced her spine straight. On her wrist, the heavy platinum bracelet Victor had given her that morning felt like a shackle and a shield all at once. "For the charity gala tonight," he had said, fastening the clasp with surprising gentleness. "You are my wife now. You must look the part." Victor stood by the entrance, taking a hushed call in Russian, his presence dominating the delicate pastel interior of the shop. Maya drifted toward a rack of evening gowns, her fingers grazing the silk of a deep emerald dress. It was beautiful, far more elegant than anything she had ever dared to touch. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut in. Maya turned to see a sales associate with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a frozen smile standing too close. The woman looked Maya up and down, her gaze lingering on Maya's simple boots and the texture of her hair. The judgment was instant and familiar. "The clearance section is in the back, near the service exit," the clerk said, her tone dripping with polite condescension. "These gowns are for serious clientele. We don't want smudges on the silk, do we?" Maya froze, the old shame burning her cheeks. It wasn't just a rude comment. It was a reminder that in this world, to people like this woman, she would never be Mrs. Sterling. She would always be the invisible help. "I'm not looking for clearance," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My husband." "I'm sure he's very nice," the clerk interrupted, turning her back to adjust a mannequin. "But unless he's parking the cars out front, I doubt he can afford anything on this rack. Please move along." The humiliation was a physical blow. Maya stepped back, ready to retreat, ready to accept the smallness this woman assigned to her. "Is there a problem assisting my wife?" The voice was low, smooth, and terrifying. Victor had ended his call. He didn't shout. He didn't storm over. He simply glided to Maya's side, sliding a protective arm around her waist. The temperature in the shop seemed to drop 10 degrees. The clerk spun around, annoyed, until she saw who was speaking. She saw the bespoke suit, the watch that cost more than the building, and the cold, predatory glint in Victor Sterling's eyes. Her face drained of color. "And Mr. Sterling?" I didn't realize." Clearly, Victor said. He didn't look at the clerk, he looked at Maya, lifting her chin with his finger, so she had to meet his eyes. "Do you like the green one?" It's expensive," Maya whispered. "I didn't ask the price. I asked if you liked it." When she nodded, Victor turned to the trembling clerk. "We will take it." "And the red one?" "And the black one." He pulled out a black credit card, holding it out. As the clerk reached for it with shaking hands, Victor pulled it back just an inch. "And fetch your manager," Victor added, his voice like a whip crack. "I want to explain to him why his establishment employs staff who insult the wife of Victor Sterling. You will be clearing out your locker before I sign the receipt." The clerk burst into tears, but Victor was unmoved. He guided Maya toward the fitting rooms, his hand warm and solid on her back. "Lift your head, Maya," he said, loud enough for the entire store to hear. "Your worth is not defined by their ignorance. You are a Sterling, and you bow to no one." Later, in the silence of the armored car, Maya touched the silk bag, sitting on the seat between them. "Why did you do that?" she asked softly. "You could have just ignored her." Victor looked out the window at the passing snow, his jaw tight. When he finally turned to her, the mask of the ruthless boss slipped, revealing a man who had spent a lifetime fighting for respect. "Because," he said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Before today, no one ever fought for you. Now I do. The Sterling estate was transformed into a winter wonderland, the scent of fresh pine and cinnamon filling the hallways, but inside Victor's study, the atmosphere was heavy with impending loss. The only light came from the roaring fireplace, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls lined with leather-bound books. It was Christmas Eve, the night of miracles, yet Victor stood by the hearth looking like a man facing his execution. Maya hesitated at the open door. She was holding a small, velvet-wrapped box of vintage watch she had spent weeks tracking down for him. It was the first time she had felt truly excited about a holiday in years. Zoe was asleep upstairs, dreaming of reindeer, and for the first time, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. She stepped inside, the floorboards creaking softly. "Victor," she called out softly. "I have something for you." Victor didn't turn around. His shoulders were rigid, the tension in his frame visible, even through his dress shirt. "Don't," he said, his voice rough. "Don't come closer, Maya." Maya froze, the smile slipping from her face. "What is it? Is something wrong? Is it Brad?" "Brad is handled," Victor said, finally turning to face her. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were haunted. He picked up a thick manila envelope from his desk and held it out to her. "This is for you. Open it." Confused, Maya set her gift down and took the envelope. Her hands trembled as she slid the contents out. It wasn't a Christmas card. It was a stack of legal documents. She scanned the top page. A title deed to a house in the suburbs fully paid for. Beneath that, a trust fund document for Zoe with a balance that made her head spin. And at the very bottom, a petition for divorce, already signed by Victor Sterling. The papers slipped from her fingers, scattering across the Persian rug like fallen leaves. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What is this?" "It's your freedom," Victor said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "The threat is gone. Brad will never bother you again. I have cleared your debts, secured your future, and ensured Zoe will never want for anything. You are no longer collateral, Maya. You are free." "You're kicking us out?" The hurt in her voice cracked the composure he was fighting so hard to maintain. "I am setting you free." Victor snapped, the fire in his eyes flaring. He stepped closer, looming over her, desperate to make her understand. "Look at me, Maya. Really look at me. I am a dangerous man. I have enemies. I live in the shadows. You and Zoe, you are light. You deserve a normal life. A husband who doesn't come home smelling of gunpowder. A father who doesn't need armed guards to take his daughter to the park." He reached out as if to touch her cheek, then pulled his hand back as if he were unworthy. "I made a vow to protect you. And the only way to protect you now is to let you go. The car is waiting. You can leave tonight." Maya looked at the man standing before her. She saw the lines of pain etched around his eyes. She realized with a jolt that he wasn't rejecting her because he didn't care. He was breaking his own heart to save her. He was offering her the one thing he thought she wanted most, at the cost of his own happiness. "Go, Maya," he whispered, turning back to the fire so she wouldn't see him break. "Leave before the snow traps you here with a monster." Maya stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. She looked at the divorce papers on the floor, then at the lonely figure of her husband. Slowly, she backed away toward the door. She gripped the cold brass handle, the metal biting into her palm. "Goodbye, Maya," Victor said to the flames. Maya opened the door and hesitated. The sound of tearing paper was louder than a gunshot in the quiet room. Victor whipped around from the fireplace, his eyes widening in rare shock. He watched as Maya stooped down, gathered the scattered pages of the divorce petition and the deeds, and ripped them down the middle again. With calm deliberation, she walked past him and tossed the confetti of legal documents into the roaring fire. The flames licked up the edges, turning the freedom he had offered her into ash. "What are you doing?" Victor rasped, his composure cracking. "I told you to go. I told you I am a monster." "I know what you told me," Maya said, stepping into his personal space, refusing to be intimidated by the man who terrified the rest of Chicago. "Now listen to me. You say you're dangerous? Maybe. But you are also the man who knelt down to fix my daughter's crown when her own father wouldn't look at her. You are the man who defended my honor in a dress shop when I couldn't find my own voice. You gave us a home. You gave me dignity." She reached out, placing her hands on his rigid shoulders. He flinched, as if her touch burned, but he didn't pull away. "You saved me when the world turned its back, Victor," she whispered, her eyes locking with his. "I don't want a real life out there if it means being without you. My real life is here. With you." "Maya," he groaned, a sound of defeat and longing. "You don't know what you're choosing." "I do," she countered firmly. "At the altar, I didn't have a choice. Tonight I do. And I choose you." The last wall around Victor's heart crumbled. With a ragged breath, he pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. It wasn't the possessive grasp of a captor. It was the desperate embrace of a drowning man finding land. When he kissed her, it wasn't a performance for a crowd. It was a promise kept. Christmas morning arrived in a blaze of winter sunlight bouncing off the fresh snow. The Sterling estate, usually quiet and austere, echoed with the sound of a child's laughter. In the living room, a mountain of wrapping paper lay on the floor. Zoe was squealing in delight, holding up a new art set, while Papa Alex, the feared crime boss, sat on the rug beside her, patiently assembling a complicated dollhouse. He looked up as Maya entered with a tray of hot cocoa, his face relaxed, younger, stripped of the shadows that had haunted him for decades. Maya sat beside him, handing him a mug. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, lingering there. He looked from the happy child playing on the rug to the woman smiling beside him. The house was warm. The gates were locked, not to keep them in, but to keep the cold world out. Victor squeezed Maya's hand, a look of wonder in his dark eyes. He leaned in, pressing a kiss to her temple as the snow fell peacefully outside the window. "I thought I owned you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "But it seems you are the one who captured me." As the snow settles outside the Sterling estate, we are reminded that true nobility isn't defined by the color of our skin or the titles we hold, but by the quiet courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Victor and Maya's story teaches us that love often arrives in the most unexpected packages, and that sometimes the scary stranger is the only one with a heart kind enough to build a home. So tonight, don't judge the book by its cover. Instead, open your heart, for kindness is the only debt worth keeping.